Japanese tourist bows and shows respect to the King's Guard. The tall buildings, the historic streets, the red double-decker buses, and especially the famous Buckingham Palace, all of it fascinated him. As a young man from Osaka, Japan, he had grown up surrounded by his own country's traditions, learning to respect customs, understand history, and appreciate quiet moments. Now, finally, he had the chance to see a world he had only read about. When Hiroshi arrived in London, the air was crisp, and the sky was a soft, pale gray. It was the kind of morning that seemed peaceful yet full of quiet energy, as if the city itself was waking up slowly. He carried a small backpack, a camera slung over his shoulder, and a notebook in which he often jotted down his thoughts. Hiroshi loved to capture memories not just in photographs, but also in words. Every place he visited became part of a story he could tell later. As he walked along the streets leading to Buckingham Palace, Hiroshi was struck by how alive the city felt. People hurried past him, some with umbrellas, others with briefcases, yet there was also a rhythm to it, a steady beat of everyday life that seemed very different from the quieter streets of Osaka. Shops displayed colorful signs, and the aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods floated in the air. Hiroshi paused often to look around, soaking in the sights, sounds, and smells, trying to remember everything. Finally, he reached the large iron gates of Buckingham Palace. The palace looked even more magnificent in real life than in any photograph. Its white facade shone faintly under the soft morning light, and the flags fluttered gently in the breeze. Hiroshi walked closer, careful to stay on the designated paths. His heart beat faster. For him, this was not just a famous tourist spot. It was a symbol of history, tradition, and discipline. At the front of the palace, Hiroshi noticed the King's Guard standing perfectly still. They were dressed in their iconic red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. Each soldier stood like a statue, unmoving, their faces calm and serious. Hiroshi had seen pictures of these guards many times before, but seeing them in person was a different experience. There was a sense of discipline and dignity about them that photos could not capture. Even from a distance, Hiroshi felt that the guards were part of a living history, carrying traditions that had been respected for centuries. Hiroshi's curiosity grew as he watched. He wondered how long the guards could remain so still. Could they feel tired? Did they think about anything while standing there, or were they completely focused on their duty? He knew that in Japan, soldiers and officials often had strict protocols as well, but seeing it in a foreign country, with such a different style and energy, was fascinating. He wanted to understand their world, even if only for a short while. He took a few cautious steps closer, careful not to cross any lines or rules. He noticed that tourists were all around, taking pictures, whispering to each other, and trying to get a glimpse of the guards up close. Some people laughed quietly or pointed at the soldiers' tall hats. Hiroshi, however, remained silent. He wanted to observe with respect, to appreciate the moment without disturbing it. He had learned in Japan that showing respect was sometimes more important than speaking. As he watched, Hiroshi remembered stories his grandfather had told him about tradition and honor. His grandfather often spoke about the value of respecting others, especially those who were carrying out their responsibilities with dedication. Hiroshi felt a quiet connection between those lessons and what he was seeing now. The King's Guard might be thousands of miles away from his home, but in a way, their discipline reminded him of the values he had been taught since childhood: patience, respect, and quiet strength. He noticed small details: the way the sunlight reflected off the buttons on the guards' uniforms, the careful steps of the changing guard ceremony, and the subtle movements that marked the end of a shift. Every motion was precise and deliberate. Hiroshi realized that each guard had undergone years of training to perform this duty perfectly. He felt admiration, not just for the uniform or the ceremony, but for the dedication and self-control it represented. Hiroshi took out his camera, but he hesitated before taking a picture. He didn't want to break the moment or seem disrespectful. He remembered that sometimes observing quietly could be more meaningful than capturing an image. So instead, he lowered the camera and simply watched, letting the memory sink in. The stillness of the guards, the grandeur of the palace, and the quiet energy of the morning all blended together into a moment that felt almost sacred. As he stood there, Hiroshi felt a mixture of excitement and reflection. Excitement because he was finally in London, experiencing something he had dreamed about for so long. Reflection because he was reminded of the importance of respect, of understanding another culture, and of connecting with moments that transcended words. In that moment, Hiroshi felt small, yet part of something larger, a shared human experience of honor, duty, and history. Hiroshi also noticed the reactions of other tourists. Some were impatient, rushing past or talking loudly. Others were clearly captivated, like him, observing the guards with awe. He wondered if they, too, were feeling the quiet power of the moment, or if they were simply seeing it as a photo opportunity. He felt grateful that he could pause and truly experience it, allowing himself to be present in a way that was sometimes difficult in a busy city. Time seemed to slow as Hiroshi continued to watch. He realized that this moment at Buckingham Palace was more than just a visit to a tourist site. It was a lesson in presence, in noticing small details, and in appreciating the effort and dedication of others. The guards, silent and composed, taught him about discipline and pride. The palace, grand and historic, reminded him of the importance of preserving traditions. And he, standing quietly among the crowd, learned about the beauty of observation, reflection, and respect. Finally, Hiroshi felt a sense of calm determination. He wanted to acknowledge the guards in his own way, not to disrupt them, but to show appreciation for their dedication. He thought about the Japanese custom of bowing, a gesture of respect and honor. Could he, a foreigner in a distant land, express respect in a simple, meaningful way? The idea grew in his mind, a quiet plan that he felt would bridge cultures without words, a way to connect with the moment and honor those standing before him. Hiroshi took a deep breath, feeling the crisp London air fill his lungs. He felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He was about to step closer to the guards, but he knew he would do so carefully, respectfully, and thoughtfully. This was not just a tourist action. It was a personal expression of honor, a way to show that he recognized the importance of their duty and the history they represented. With a final glance at the tall, stoic figures, Hiroshi felt a sense of readiness. He knew that this simple gesture, performed with sincerity, would leave a lasting impression on him. He had come to London seeking adventure and new experiences, but he realized that some of the most meaningful experiences were quiet, reflective, and deeply human. He was about to take a step that would not only honor the guards, but also become a memorable part of his journey, one that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Hiroshi adjusted his posture, straightened his shoulders, and moved closer, careful to stay within the respectful distance from the guards. His heart beat steadily, and he felt a quiet focus that made him aware of every step. The city noises faded slightly as he concentrated on the present moment. He thought about the lessons of patience, observation, and respect he had learned from his family. And as he prepared to make his gesture, he felt a deep connection to the history, culture, and human experience that surrounded him. Hiroshi stepped back slightly from the gate and took a deep breath. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting a warm glow over Buckingham Palace. The stone walls and grand gates seemed even more majestic in this light, and the King's Guard, standing as if carved from history itself, appeared almost timeless. Hiroshi's eyes moved slowly over the soldiers, perfectly straight postures, the sharp lines of their red uniforms, and the tall, black bearskin hats. Everything about them spoke of precision, discipline, and a deep sense of duty. He felt a mix of admiration and curiosity. These soldiers were not just performing a routine, they were living a centuries-old tradition. Each movement, no matter how small, was calculated, meaningful, and practiced countless times. Hiroshi remembered stories he had read about royal ceremonies, how they were rehearsed for years, and how each guard was trained to remain perfectly still for long periods. The thought filled him with awe. Here, right in front of him, was history in motion, or rather, history standing still. As he observed, Hiroshi's mind wandered to his own country, Japan. In Osaka, he had often watched guards and officials performing ceremonial duties during festivals or public events. The Japanese soldiers and officers were also precise and disciplined, but their rituals felt different, quieter, more subtle. Seeing the British guards, Hiroshi realized that every culture had its own way of showing respect and honor. The idea that traditions could be expressed in such unique forms fascinated him. He wondered how it felt to be a guard here, standing for hours without moving, becoming almost part of the architecture itself. Hiroshi took a small step closer, careful not to cross any boundaries. He wanted to feel the energy of the place without disturbing it. Around him, other tourists whispered and pointed their cameras, eager to capture the scene. Some were laughing, talking loudly, or making jokes about the tall hats. Hiroshi felt slightly impatient with them, not out of anger, but because he didn't want this moment to be reduced to a photo opportunity. For him, it was something deeper, more personal. He wanted to connect with the spirit of the place, even if only for a brief time. Standing there, Hiroshi reflected on his own values and upbringing. In Japan, bowing was more than a gesture. It was a way of showing respect, gratitude, or apology. The depth of meaning behind a simple bow had been impressed upon him since childhood. He remembered bowing to his teachers, to elders, to his parents, and to strangers as a way of acknowledging their presence and showing humility. It was a small movement, but it carried weight. And now, in a foreign land, he wondered how that tradition could be expressed here, among people with very different customs. He thought about the king's guard again. They were silent, still, and seemingly impervious to the chaos around them. But Hiroshi knew they were human, trained to control their expressions, movements, and even their thoughts while on duty. He imagined the strength it must take to remain motionless while people laughed, whispered, and sometimes even tried to provoke them. That required discipline, focus, and self-control, the very qualities that Hiroshi had always admired in people. Hiroshi's thoughts drifted further. What would happen if he showed respect? Would it be understood? Would it be appreciated, ignored, or misunderstood? The idea of connecting across cultures fascinated him. In Japan, respect was communicated in very specific ways, and a bow was often the most universal of gestures. Could he use this gesture here to honor someone whose culture was different but whose dedication was clear? He felt a quiet desire to bridge the gap between his world and theirs. The crowd around him continued to shift. A family with small children passed by, pointing excitedly at the guards. Two young tourists whispered to each other, laughing as they took selfies. Hiroshi, however, remained focused. He could feel the tension between the chaos of the crowd and the calm of the soldiers. The guards were like islands of discipline in a sea of curiosity and noise. This contrast made him reflect even more on the value of patience and awareness. He realized that true respect sometimes required quiet observation before any action. Hiroshi stepped even closer, feeling the smoothness of the paved walkway beneath his shoes. He observed the guards' boots, polished to a shine, standing perfectly aligned with one another. The detail fascinated him, the way the uniform was tailored to fit precisely, the way each piece of equipment was positioned with care. Every element had meaning and purpose. Hiroshi thought about how in life, small details often reflected character, commitment, and care. He could see that in the guards' work. He paused to take out his notebook and pen, a habit he had developed on previous travels. He began writing, though carefully, so as not to draw attention. His words flowed slowly as he tried to capture his thoughts. Discipline is not just about standing still. It is about focus, patience, and honor. Even in silence, meaning is present. Even in stillness, there is life. Writing these lines made him feel more connected to the moment. He was not just observing history, he was participating in it in his own way, through reflection and thought. Hiroshi felt a surge of courage. He realized that the next step, his gesture of respect, needed to be sincere. He could not perform it half-heartedly. It had to come from a place of genuine admiration and understanding. In Japan, gestures were meaningful when performed with intention, not as mere formality. He knew that if he bowed properly, it would convey respect even across language and cultural differences. He imagined the scene in his mind, approaching the guard calmly, bowing respectfully, and holding that position just long enough to show sincerity. He imagined the subtle acknowledgement that might follow, a slight glance, a nod, or even just the continued presence of the guard, unaffected but honored. It was a simple act, yet its meaning could be profound. Hiroshi felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with nervousness. The guards continued their silent vigil, unaware of his internal deliberation. Hiroshi realized that part of respect was timing and awareness. He could not rush the moment. He had to wait until he felt completely ready. He observed the rhythm of their movements, noting the subtle shifts that marked changes in posture or duty. By paying attention, he hoped to enter this ritual with care rather than disturbance. Around him, the day grew brighter. The sun reflected off the windows of the palace, creating patterns of light that danced on the stone walls. Birds chirped faintly, and the distant sound of traffic reminded him that the city was alive and moving, even as he stood in this quiet, timeless moment. Hiroshi felt a connection between the bustling city and the still palace guards. Both had their place, and both demanded attention in their own ways. The guards taught him about patience and discipline, while the city reminded him of life's constant motion. Hiroshi took another step forward, this time feeling more confident. His heart still beat faster, but the nervousness had shifted to focus. He realized that respect was not only about gestures but also about presence. To truly honor someone, one must be fully present, attentive to the moment, and aware of one's surroundings. He looked at the guard closest to him, noting the calm expression, the upright posture, and the sense of duty radiating from him. Hiroshi felt a deep admiration. He remembered his grandfather's words again. Respect is universal. You can honor anyone anywhere as long as your intention is sincere. Those words resonated now more than ever. Hiroshi felt that his bow, if performed with genuine heart, could transcend language, culture, and distance. He did not need words. He did not need permission. He only needed sincerity. Hiroshi took a small, steadying breath. He adjusted his posture, aligning his back and shoulders, preparing his body and mind for the gesture he had been contemplating. He thought about how a simple bow could express gratitude, acknowledgement, and honor, and how the guards' dedication had inspired this moment. He felt calm yet alert, ready to act in a way that was meaningful both to him and, perhaps, to the silent figure before him. The crowd continued to move around him, but Hiroshi no longer noticed it. He was focused entirely on the guard, the palace, and the moment. Every detail, the gleam of the buttons, the shadow of the bearskin hat, the crispness of the uniform, felt amplified. Time seemed to slow, allowing him to fully experience the anticipation, reflection, and preparation. He realized that the act of respect was as important as the act itself. Hiroshi thought about what would happen next. He imagined a perfect, quiet bow performed with sincerity and a moment of acknowledgement from the guard. A professional, subtle glance, a slight shift, or nothing at all. Any response would not diminish the meaning of the gesture. What mattered was the intention behind it. This reflection gave him courage. He realized that even if the guard did not respond, the act would still honor the discipline and dedication that Hiroshi admired so deeply. Feeling ready, Hiroshi straightened himself fully, took a deep, deliberate breath, and prepared to take the next step. The anticipation was no longer anxiety but excitement. He was about to perform a simple gesture with a depth of meaning that bridged cultures, acknowledged dedication, and reflected his own values. The moment was almost ready to unfold, and as he stood there, Hiroshi felt an extraordinary sense of calm clarity. He understood that this act, simple yet profound, would remain with him forever. The careful observation, the reflection on culture, and the intention behind the gesture were all part of the experience. He realized that respect was universal, quiet, and powerful, capable of connecting people across time, space, and tradition. Hiroshi took another deep breath, feeling the crisp London air fill his lungs. His heart beat steadily, a mix of excitement and quiet focus. He had spent the morning observing, reflecting, and preparing for this moment, and now it was finally here. Every step he took toward the king's guard felt deliberate, measured, and meaningful. He was aware of the crowd around him, the tourists, the families, the camera flashes, but he no longer paid them much attention. His entire focus was on the soldier in front of him and the act of respect he was about to perform. As he drew closer, he noticed the guard more clearly than ever. The tall bearskin hat seemed almost unreal, casting a shadow over the soldier's face. The red uniform was immaculate, with gold buttons gleaming in the sunlight. Every detail, from the perfectly polished boots to the crisp lines of the coat, spoke of precision and care. Hiroshi felt a surge of admiration. This was not just a costume or a display. It was a symbol of dedication, discipline, and honor. For a moment, he felt a deep connection to the centuries of history that this single figure represented. Hiroshi paused just a few feet from the guard, careful to maintain a respectful distance. He straightened his back, squared his shoulders, and lowered his gaze slightly, as he would when bowing in Japan. He felt the weight of the moment, knowing that even a simple gesture could carry profound meaning if performed with sincerity. In his mind, he replayed the lessons his grandfather had taught him about respect, about observing quietly before acting, and about the power of intention. Around him, the crowd seemed to fade. Voices became background noise, and flashes from cameras seemed less intrusive. Hiroshi's attention was fully on the guard. He imagined the soldier's life, years of training, countless hours of standing still, a commitment to duty that few could truly understand. He thought about how much courage and discipline it must take to remain calm and composed while the world moved around him. Hiroshi felt gratitude and respect not just for the uniform, but for the dedication behind it. Then with a deep exhale, Hiroshi bent forward slowly in a bow. His movement was deliberate, smooth, and respectful. He held the position for a few seconds, long enough to convey sincerity, but not so long as to make the guard uncomfortable or break the flow of duty. His eyes were lowered, his hands gently at his sides, and his posture straight and purposeful. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it carried all the respect, admiration, and reflection he had felt since arriving at the palace. The guard remained still as expected, but Hiroshi noticed a subtle shift in the soldier's posture. It was almost imperceptible, a slight, measured adjustment of the head, a careful alignment of the body. Hiroshi imagined that the guard, trained to remain impassive, might still recognize the sincerity in this unusual gesture. Though there was no smile, no overt acknowledgement, Hiroshi felt a quiet connection. For a brief moment, the disciplined world of the guard and the reflective heart of the visitor intersected. Nearby tourists whispered, some curious about what was happening. A few pointed their cameras, trying to capture the scene, but Hiroshi was not concerned. He had already experienced the moment fully. The act of bowing had allowed him to communicate something beyond words, beyond photographs, beyond the usual tourist experience. He had honored the guard's duty, expressed his own cultural respect, and felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Hiroshi straightened slowly, raising his head to look at the guard once more. Their eyes met briefly, and in that instant Hiroshi felt an unspoken understanding. There was no need for words. The bow had said everything. He felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet joy that came from connecting across cultures, across traditions, and across the simple human desire to show respect. The crowd around him began to move again, some tourists stepping forward, others leaving, but Hiroshi remained for a few more moments, taking in the scene. He noticed the palace gates, the bright morning light, and the disciplined soldiers, and he felt grateful. Grateful for the opportunity to witness something so unique, for the ability to perform an act of sincerity, and for the memory that would stay with him forever. He began to walk slowly away from the guard, but his eyes continued to observe the scene. The other soldiers shifted slightly, performing their silent duties, and Hiroshi appreciated the rhythm and precision of their movements. He realized that discipline, patience, and respect were universal values, even when expressed in different forms. The bow had been a small gesture, but it had allowed him to participate in that universal language of honor. As he walked, Hiroshi reflected on the moment. He thought about how simple actions could carry deep meaning. A bow, performed with sincerity, had communicated respect without words. It had bridged cultures and connected hearts in a way that was quiet yet powerful. He felt a sense of accomplishment, not for himself, but for the shared understanding that had been created, however briefly, between him and the guard. Hiroshi stopped by a nearby bench, taking out his notebook once again. He wrote carefully, documenting the experience so that he could remember every detail. A simple gesture can carry profound meaning, he wrote. Respect is universal. Discipline and dedication deserve acknowledgement no matter where we are. Silence can speak louder than words. Writing these words made him feel even more connected to the moment. He realized that experiences like this were not just for photographs or souvenirs. They were for the heart, for reflection, and for personal growth. Around him, the city of London continued to move. The sounds of traffic, conversations, and distant footsteps reminded him that life was ongoing, even as he experienced this still, reflective moment. He felt a sense of balance, between motion and stillness, between the busy world and the quiet discipline of the palace guards. This balance, he realized, was part of what made the moment so memorable. It was not just the act of bowing, but the awareness, presence, and sincerity behind it that gave it meaning. Hiroshi noticed a few children pointing at him, curious about what he had done. He smiled softly, understanding that they might not fully grasp the cultural significance, but perhaps they sensed the respect and sincerity in his actions. He felt a quiet hope that moments like these could inspire others, even in small ways, to recognize the importance of understanding and honoring the efforts of others. He also thought about his family back in Japan. He imagined telling his grandfather about the experience, describing the guards, the palace, and the bow. He knew his grandfather would understand the significance, would appreciate the reflection, and would perhaps smile at the idea of a young man honoring tradition while exploring the world. This thought brought him comfort and a deeper sense of connection to both his own culture and the new culture he was experiencing. Hiroshi continued to write in his notebook, adding small details about the weather, the sounds, the way the sunlight fell on the palace, and the subtle movements of the guards. Each detail seemed important, as if capturing the atmosphere would allow him to relive the experience later. He realized that the memory of this bow would stay with him longer than any photograph, more vivid and meaningful because it was experienced with thoughtfulness and intention. After a few moments, Hiroshi closed his notebook and stood, feeling a sense of completion. He had participated in a small but meaningful act, observed history in motion, and connected across cultures. He felt lighter, more aware, and quietly joyful. The memory of the bow, the disciplined guard, and the quiet respect he had shared would remain with him as a symbol of what it meant to truly honor others, even in a foreign land. As he began to walk away from Buckingham Palace, Hiroshi turned for one last glance. The guards remained as they had been, silent, composed, and dignified. He felt gratitude, not just for the moment itself, but for the lessons it had taught him. Discipline, respect, and presence were not just abstract ideas. They were living values, expressed through action, observation, and reflection. Hiroshi left the palace with a sense of quiet satisfaction. He knew that the experience would stay with him forever, not because of the location or the uniform, but because of the sincerity behind his actions and the connection he had felt. He realized that small gestures, performed with genuine intention, could create lasting memories, meaningful experiences, and bridges between cultures. Walking down the streets of London, Hiroshi felt a renewed sense of curiosity and openness. The city was full of new experiences, waiting to be discovered, but he carried with him the quiet joy of the morning at Buckingham Palace. The bow he had made, though simple, had been profound. It had allowed him to honor another person, connect with history, and reflect deeply on his own values. It was a moment that reminded him that the world was full of opportunities for respect, understanding, and human connection. Hiroshi's thoughts wandered as he moved further from the palace. He thought about how many other moments like this might be waiting in the world, opportunities to show respect, to connect across cultures, and to learn from others. He felt inspired, knowing that even a small gesture could carry immense meaning if done with sincerity. He carried the memory of the bow with him, like a quiet flame of understanding and reflection, ready to illuminate the next part of his journey. Hiroshi walked slowly away from Buckingham Palace, letting the crisp London air fill his lungs. The morning had grown warmer, and sunlight reflected softly off the palace walls, casting long, gentle shadows over the pavement. Even as he left the gates behind him, the experience of the bow, the quiet gesture of respect he had offered to the king's guard, remained vivid in his mind. Each step felt like a continuation of the moment, a reflection of the quiet pride and satisfaction he had felt moments ago. He paused on a nearby bridge, overlooking a small section of the palace gardens. From this distance, the guards still appeared like statues, standing with unwavering attention to their duties. Hiroshi observed them for a few moments longer, noticing the way their presence seemed to calm the surrounding environment. Despite the busy city around them, there was an order, a rhythm, a quiet dignity that seemed to emanate from their very being. He realized that the palace, the guards, and the traditions they upheld were more than history or ceremony. They were living lessons in patience, discipline, and respect. Hiroshi thought about the act of bowing itself. He had performed the gesture carefully, intentionally, and with complete sincerity. At first, he had wondered whether such a small action could truly communicate respect, whether it would be understood by someone from a different culture. But now he felt certain that it had. Respect, he realized, was a universal language, one that transcended words, gestures, and even customs. When it came from the heart, it could connect people in ways that were subtle but profound. As he walked along the quiet streets, Hiroshi reflected on the preparation that had led to the bow. The morning had been filled with observation, reflection, and thoughtful consideration. He had watched the guards, noticed every detail, and considered the meaning behind their actions. He had paused to write in his notebook, documenting not just the visual elements, but the feelings, the thoughts, and the lessons that the moment had inspired. In retrospect, he understood that the bow had been only the culmination of a larger process of respect and awareness. Hiroshi found a small cafe and decided to sit for a while, enjoying a warm cup of tea. The gentle steam rising from the cup mirrored the warmth he felt inside. As he sipped slowly, he reflected on how the experience had affected him. It was not just about seeing a famous sight or performing a culturally significant gesture. It was about connecting deeply with history, culture, and human values. He realized that moments like these were rare, precious, and worth savoring fully. While observing the streets outside the cafe, Hiroshi thought about the tourists he had seen that morning. Many of them had rushed past the guards, taking photos without fully observing or reflecting on what they were witnessing. Some had laughed, whispered, or treated the guards as props for their entertainment. Hiroshi felt no judgment toward them, but he understood that his approach had been different. He had allowed himself to pause, to think, and to connect sincerely. This reflection made him appreciate the value of patience, observation, and deliberate action. He also thought about his own culture and upbringing. In Japan, respect was not just an action, it was a mindset. Bowing, listening carefully, observing quietly, these were ways to honor not only people, but the values they represented. Hiroshi realized that the act of bowing to the king's guard had allowed him to extend these principles beyond his own culture, to recognize and honor the dedication and discipline of someone from another country. It was a small bridge between worlds, but it carried great meaning. Hiroshi recalled the brief moment of connection he had felt with the guard. Though the soldier had remained expressionless, Hiroshi had sensed something subtle, an acknowledgement of his sincerity. That small, almost imperceptible detail had left a lasting impression. He realized that human connection did not always require words or obvious gestures. Sometimes, it was the quiet, intentional actions that mattered most. The bow had been his way of participating in a universal language of respect, and in doing so, he had created a memory that would stay with him forever. He thought about how this experience might influence his future travels. Hiroshi realized that observing, reflecting, and acting with intention could transform ordinary visits into meaningful experiences. A photograph could capture an image, a guidebook could provide facts, but true understanding and connection required presence, thoughtfulness, and sincere action. This insight filled him with a quiet excitement for the journeys yet to come. He wanted to approach every new place with the same awareness, respect, and openness that he had shown at Buckingham Palace. As he walked back toward the main streets of London, Hiroshi noticed how the city had changed since the morning. The streets were busier now, filled with people going about their daily routines. Yet he carried with him a sense of calm, a quiet center of reflection that contrasted with the bustle around him. The bow, simple as it had been, had created a moment of inner peace. It had reminded him that even amidst chaos, one could find stillness, focus, and connection. Hiroshi paused again near a small park, sitting on a bench to watch people passing by. He noticed the children playing, the couples strolling hand in hand, and the workers moving quickly from one place to another. Life was moving continuously, but he felt as if he had discovered a quiet thread running through it all, a thread of respect, awareness, and human connection. The morning at Buckingham Palace had taught him that small gestures, performed with sincerity, could weave that thread into the fabric of daily life. He thought again about the lessons of discipline and dedication that the guards represented. Their presence had reminded him that commitment was expressed not only through words or titles, but through actions, repetition, and integrity. Even when unacknowledged, their duty was meaningful. Hiroshi felt inspired by this realization, considering how he could bring similar dedication to his own life, through work, relationships, and personal growth. Hiroshi also reflected on the broader implications of cultural exchange. He realized that travel was not just about sightseeing or collecting memories. It was about understanding others, honoring their values, and finding common ground across differences. His bow had been a small step in this direction, a gesture that connected him to another culture while remaining true to his own. The experience had expanded his perspective, teaching him that respect was a universal principle that could transcend borders, languages, and customs. He opened his notebook once again, feeling the urge to record the final reflections of the day. His pen moved carefully across the page, capturing thoughts and feelings in detail. "Today I learned that respect is more than a gesture," he wrote. "It is attention, presence, understanding, and sincerity. Even a small action can create a lasting connection. Discipline, patience, and dedication are visible in many forms, and we can honor them wherever we go. True travel is not only seeing, but understanding." Writing these words gave him a sense of closure, as if he were completing the story of the morning and preserving it for the future. Hiroshi looked around the park again, noticing the subtle beauty of the day. The sunlight filtering through the trees, the gentle movement of leaves in the breeze, and the peaceful rhythm of people enjoying simple moments. He felt a quiet gratitude for being able to experience life in this way, fully present, fully engaged, and fully reflective. The memory of the bow, the guards, and the palace was no longer just an isolated event. It had become part of a larger understanding of the world and his place within it. As the afternoon progressed, Hiroshi continued to explore the city, visiting small streets, historic buildings, and quiet corners that few tourists noticed. Yet the memory of the morning stayed with him, coloring every step with a sense of awareness and meaning. He realized that travel was not only about seeing famous landmarks, but also about observing life, recognizing the value of others, efforts, and participating in the shared human experience with respect and thoughtfulness. Hiroshi thought about how he might share this experience with friends and family back home. He knew that stories of famous places were common, but stories of personal reflection, genuine gestures, and moments of connection were far rarer. He felt a quiet pride in being able to convey not only what he had seen, but also what he had felt. The story of the bow was his, unique, and deeply meaningful, a memory that could inspire others to act with respect and awareness wherever they traveled. By the time the sun began to lower in the sky, casting a soft golden glow over London, Hiroshi felt a deep sense of completion. The day had started with curiosity, observation, and anticipation. It had progressed through reflection, preparation, and action. And now it concluded with understanding, insight, and quiet joy. He realized that the morning at Buckingham Palace was not just a moment in his travels. It was a lesson for life, a reminder that sincerity, respect, and presence could transform ordinary experiences into extraordinary ones. As he walked toward his hotel, Hiroshi reflected one last time on the guard he had bowed to. Though the soldier had remained silent and impassive, the experience had been meaningful. The guard's discipline, patience, and dedication had inspired him. The simple bow had created a connection that transcended culture, language, and tradition. Hiroshi understood that this memory would remain with him, not as a photograph or a souvenir, but as a living lesson in respect, reflection, and human connection. That night, as Hiroshi prepared for bed, he felt a quiet happiness settle within him. The day had been simple yet profound. He had witnessed history, honored dedication, and expressed respect in a way that resonated deeply with his values. The memory of the bow, the palace, and the guards would stay with him forever, a reminder that even the smallest gestures, performed with sincerity, could carry extraordinary meaning. He closed his eyes, recalling the sound of the city, the warmth of the sunlight, and the stillness of the guards. He felt gratitude for the opportunity to experience this, for the lessons learned, and for the understanding gained. Hiroshi knew that he would carry this moment in his heart for the rest of his life, using it as a reminder to act with respect, awareness, and sincerity wherever he went. And with that thought, Hiroshi drifted into a peaceful sleep, the quiet joy of the morning at Buckingham Palace resting in his mind like a cherished memory, ready to guide him through the journeys and reflections yet to come.